You are now tuned in to the Cosmic Convos podcast, your number one source for accurate, relevant, and thought-provoking astrological conversations in the podcast nation. The place where stars and minds align.
Peace, you're now tuned into the Cosmic Convos podcast. I'm your humbled host, Heru, and we got the man of the hour, Brother Ra. How you doing?
Well, brother, enjoying life, taking it a day at a time, and enjoying the times and days that we live in, my brother. How about yourself?
Man, same here, man. Like, grateful for every breath, I take, and get an opportunity to wake up, man, and take another good stab at this thing, and whatnot. Indeed. But before we get too far, man, I want to remind everybody that this episode is brought to you by Push It Forward Media Group, Calipusha Astrology, and our good patrons over on Patreon. Special shout out to all the patrons out there. Thank you for your continued support, and we definitely got some more stuff coming for you all or whatnot. But if you want to check out Push It Forward Media Group and Ninth Lord Films as well, you can find us, on Instagram at Push It Forward. That's PUSHITFWD. You can find Ninth Lord Films at Ninth Lord. That's 9, the number 9, TH Lord Films on Instagram, and ninethlord.com, right? And pushitforward.com, spelled just like the Instagram handle. Go there, check us out. Check out my new short film, The Long Way. Been getting a pretty good response on that. And we got other things coming. Got a bunch of other little content. And this podcast is on pushitforward.com as well. So you could definitely tune in. That's another location for you to check out this podcast. Brother Ra, how can other people get in touch with you?
Get in touch with me primarily just through Facebook or IG. Shechem Ra on both of those, but definitely get a hold of me, or you can hit me up on calipushastrology@gmail.com. Either one of those would definitely get a hold of me.
Indeed, man. So, yeah, man, we got a last episode, man. Did pretty good, man. We got a lot of good feedback on that. A lot of, I think it was a real polished episode. Pretty timely. Malcolm X is definitely, a legend. He still continues to impact the world, and it's, it was good to, be able to, kind of share some of the details of his life according to his chart and everything like that. What you think?
Yeah. I got everybody around here watching it, watching the whole movie now, going back over, listening to the podcast, like, oh yeah, I see it. I'm like, well, read the autobiography, because the autobiography really expressly details his life in that regard. But it is nice to just even see the fact that people are that I know are going back and just looking over a lot of his life events and really tying it into how the destiny reads. So I say it was an excellent show. I got a lot of positive feedback as well. I got some feedback that said maybe they didn't agree with everything I said, but I'm not here to be agreed with. I'm just here to read the chart, right? So
yeah. What was some
it wasn't expressed in the sense of what was the conjecture. It was just expressed that there was not an eye-to-eye perception of what was said. And I don't think it was necessarily maybe what I said, maybe how I said it. So, because the facts remain what I stated. In fact, and you know what? I'm glad you brought that up. I had a chance to watch the documentary.
You did?
Yeah. And bruh, everything in the chart made even more sense.
That's what I told you, man.
Like, wow. Yeah. Yeah. That's heavy. It was heavy.
Yeah.
Definitely. So, but I appreciate it, man. Everything serves to further, so I appreciate the feedback nonetheless, and it helps me even get a bird's eye view from the fact that other people still view him in different lights. But nonetheless, still was a great episode, right? And this one will definitely go down as one as well.
Indeed, man. I did want to say, man, before we jump all the way into this, topic, man. It's just, the times, man. We we're gonna have to hit one of those post checks again, man, because it's, a lot of the stuff we've been talking about in last season and in this season is just unraveling out here. Man, is interesting, man.
Yeah, we'll do a pulse check next week. Astrological pulse check, because it really actually is a great time to do it, because
Yeah.
in fact today is that's all right. It still counts because we're gonna do one next week, right? We'll do it next week when it drops. We'll have a pulse check, because the one thing that we do want to mention here, folks, that Mercury's gonna go retrograde here, right?
Tomorrow.
On Thursday, right? Tomorrow at 10:05 a.m. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Mountain Daylight Time, whatever respective time you're in. So it'll be 11:05 Central Time, 12:05 Eastern, and 9:05 California time, right?
Yeah.
So Mercury goes retrograde tomorrow for a few weeks. This happens 3 times a year, folks. It's not panic time. It's just time to dot your I's and cross your T's, right? Get on your P's and Q's, as they say, right?
Yeah.
But Mars also enters in Pisces tomorrow at 8:45 a.m. So it's kind of funny that both these planets are making some major shifts and some reorientations almost within about 2 hours time frame.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good time to really have a good pulse check to review some things that we might have not paid attention to in the past 6 months, 3 months, 1 month, right? So that's important. Venus goes direct, right, next week on the 25th at 8:55 a.m. Again, Mountain Daylight Time.
Yeah.
And so again, this is a time when you'll notice relationships are going to reorient, right? Love life is going to reshift. Anything that you didn't deal with within the past retrograde cycle, within the past few weeks, right? And I'm going to say few. Venus has been retrograde for a nice period of time. If you haven't dealt with any issues in that regard, as far as relationships, social issues, in fact, you're noticing social issues right now abounding because this retrograde is about to slingshot forward directly. In fact, a few days after the eclipse. It's just funny how all of these little things are just lining up to show you that there's patterns that are ensuing or changes abounding. But nonetheless, the solar eclipse is the big piece, right? And it happens at 6 a.m. on June 21st, right? Which is Sunday. And so all of these changes, and there's always changes, folks. Movements of the planets are happening all the time, but the thing is that they're all kind of coalescing into a moment in a space, right? And when we come out of this space in the next 3 months, in the next 6 months, right, you're going to notice points of other points of shifts, other shifts and other points that are changing. But September 21st is the equinox. Isn't it strange that we have an equinox that is the midpoint of the actual time when this particular thing will boil over? In fact, the midpoint happens to be simultaneously when flu season starts. And I mentioned in other shows, remember, that time is a crucial time. So just keeping notice, right? Keeping a pulse check, keeping your eye to the sky, ears to the street, right? Noticing what's going on around you, being cognizant, not allowing things to slip by, as far as being the time to use, right? Which we use the time wisely now because it seems like things are okay. Everybody's back in business. But just wait. If you notice how things are, it's not going to be this way when that midpoint of the solstice or the equinox, the midpoint of the eclipse cycle happens, right? So just keep, right, we're going to talk more about that on the pulse check next week, but just keep in mind this week, folks, these things are happening, and keep in mind to be aware being really cool, calm, and collective, meditative, introspective, um, and really focused on trying to refine yourself spiritually during that solstice time, right? It's not some time to be afraid of or fearful, but it is a time to honor and respect because it is a rare occasion, even though it does happen.
Indeed, man, indeed. So, let's go ahead and jump in, man. This is another show, man. Y'all been asking for since the first episode. Indeed.
Indeed. So this is one I've been waiting to do for a while, because it's really a topic that is popularized just by way of Western culture, and even the fact that now, of course, we're realizing that we're connected to the Kemetic legacy. The Great Pyramid stands as a testament to that legacy, right?
Yeah.
And it's by far in fact, it's considered one of the 7 wonders of the world. Well, we don't even have any 7. The rest of the wonders we can't seem to find too well. It's the only wonder of the ancient world, if you will. But the Great Pyramid, stands the test of time. In fact, there's an old statement that says that the only thing that time fears is the pyramids, right? And I mean, shows, right? Long after these buildings here in this nation were gone, the pyramids will still be there, right? When the society falls and asunder and a new one rises in its place, the pyramids will still be there, right? It's just not going to go anywhere for millions of years, folks. So, right, literally, that's why they say, the only thing that time fears is the pyramids themselves. And so, it's so well built, such an exquisite work of so many different things, of art, of scientific engineering, of astronomical expertise, mathematical expertise. I mean, the Great Pyramid is a panacea of so many different sciences and different levels of knowledge. It's just, you could study it for lifetimes and still not have cracked the surface of its knowledge. In fact, that's why they can't build it, right?
Yeah.
They've tried to do it. They duplicated as much as they can. There's a good couple of things to check out. I'm not saying I'm in agreement with it completely, but it does have some things to remunerate and kind of exaggerate on with regards to the sciences of the Great Pyramid. One of them is called the Giza power plant. I'm not an advocate of the theory so-called behind what he proclaims all the way. I say that probably some of it is right, but that's one of the books you can check out as the Great Pyramid. I'm not trying to think of the guy's name. It'll come to me in a minute. The Giza power plant is one, and then there's another.
I know
Michael
what you're talking
Dunn.
about.
Michael Dunn. That's his name.
Yeah.
And then there is another great piece of work to research, and that is the Great Pyramid Decoded, and by Peter Lemieux, I think. 2 great reads, right? Definitely should have in your archives if you are a lover of ancient Kemet, or try to practice anything has to do with ancient Kemet. Those are 2 great books you should have in your shelf. But you should also research, and there's not a book. I think there's a book about them, but there's a lot of information. Ed Leeskelin, right? Check him out. And Ed Leeskelin is purported. In fact, it's not purported. He really did build a place called Coral Castle in Florida. And Coral Castle, it was built by himself. He built it alone, right? I mean, there's people that testify to this stuff. This is in the 20th century. So check out Ed Leeskelin. He claims to say, "I have the secret to how the ancient Egyptians built the pyramids." Right? And I would have to say I would at least lend him some credit, because I don't think many of us could lift a 5-ton stone by ourselves in the middle of the night, and then for someone the next day to come in and see that it's been placed there. I mean, you couldn't even get a bunch of men to do that, let alone with precision. So check out Eblis Glen, check out the Giza Power Plant, and definitely check out the Great Pyramid Decoded. Now, a lot of these books are westernized, European, perspectives, but they do have some very important information, like the fact that the pyramid is like a large crystal. In fact, this is proven that the many of the blocks inside the pyramid are made of concrete that are made of seashells. And so, I mean, considering we knew how to make concrete, 5,000 years ago, I mean, shows the testament of the advancement and the technological ability of the ancient Cometians. But nonetheless, really getting into the show, the technical name, right? And there's a few conjectures out there, but I would say it is probably the closest to correct. The proper name is Merkut, right? For the Great Pyramid. Now, the word pyramid, literally, if you break it down, is very simple, right? It's pyra, right? Like pyro, right? Same similar root, same sound, same phonetic value, right?
Yeah.
Pyre, right? Pyro, pira, and then mid, which is obviously the middle. Now, I'm not too sure if you can catch what was said, but they're basically saying that, hey, this thing I saw had some fire in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Not on the outside, in the middle.
Yeah.
You can't see in the middle of the object. So someone told someone or had an idea about something, maybe, right, was actually correct, right?
Yeah.
And, to the Greeks, everything is fire. There was light, right? Right? You see, light is fire, right? It doesn't matter what kind of light it is, because you haven't been told there's different kinds of light, right? Or fire is a type of light, or produces light, rather. So, someone had maybe an idea of naming it correctly to some degree, right? Because the way it's structured and the way it's designed actually is there to harness light, right?
Yeah.
And, right, right? Most people don't know, like myrrh, right? The word myrrh in Kemet, right? We don't say love, right? If you hear the word tameri, right? That's one of the names of Kemet. Kemet has many names, right? Tanahisi, right? But Tameri, right, is the beloved land, or beloved land, or the land that is beloved, or we love this land, or we love where we're from. Like, our people are no different than who we are now, right? Everyone loves their hood, their where they're from, right? Everyone loves their team, right? It's the same thing. They love the land. They love the abundance of the land. They love the smell of the land. I don't know if you're from wherever you're from. Like, I'm from Denver, right? So when I grew up, I can smell when the seasons would come. Like, literally, I can smell when spring would come, fall would come. I knew that it was a different smell in the air just by being there for so long. You know the differences in the seasons. If someone dropped me off, I can smell and say, yep, not because of the heat, but because literally the land produces a different aura each season, each change, right? So that connection to the land is crucial. And Tamari is, they literally were saying that this is our loved land, or our loved place where we reside. And so Mary is the key word, right? And Mer is the root in Mary. Well, we said beloved, right? So Mer is love, right? It's the equivalent of what we would call the quote-unquote word love. And remember, this is the Greek word we're using, which has about 4 different connotations other than what you would probably think is eros, right? Which is conjugal love, right?
Yeah.
So the word love, right, in the sense of what we're talking about, remember the principle of the mercurial principle, what we call Anpu, Apawat, Sebek, different names for the same thing, right? Eshu, Elegba, right, opens doors and closes doors. So I'm not understanding that key word. gives you a misunderstanding of what we're talking about. But the symbol shows you the reality behind the word, and the symbol is an actual backhoe, which we use to cultivate the land. So literally, the word for pyramid, the proper word in Kemet is mer, which means to cultivate, right? Or if you're cultivating something, you're harnessing it as well, right? You're controlling it, you're manipulating it. And ku is light. Well, kahut is light that is encapsulated, or light is in the physical sense. Ku is in the light of in the sense of enlightenment, like as in you are a bright person. But kut, right? Kahut is in the sense of light, physical light. Right? That's how you know, because the T ending manifests as an essence or physicality of something, meaning almost as if it's tangible.
Yeah.
Light is tangible, right? Because you obviously can reflect light. You can change light's color, right? It's manipulatable. So mer is the cultivation or the harnessing of light. That's what the pyramid is. The name tells you, right? So we don't have to conjecture about all the other stuff. We know basically, right? It's a large machine that harnesses light. Now, what kind of light? We'll talk about that in a minute, right? But when people say, "What about the Giza power plant?" We built things to have multiple functions. We don't have to necessarily build something to do one thing. It can do multiple things at once, right?
Yeah.
So, talking about the Mercury, right, pyramid, right? There's conjecture about when it's built, and I'm not going to get into when and how long, the time frames, right? Some people say it was built, before the dynastic rule, and that the dynastic rule reconditioned and reconstructed it to some degree. I would beg to differ, right? I think it was built during when they said it was built. We have records that show emphatically it was built during the fifth, fourth, third, fourth, and fifth dynasties. So that's no mystery, right? But
Yeah.
the science of how it was built is the reason of how it was built is, right? And literally, why doesn't it work today? We're going to talk about that, right? So, because it should work, right? If it's a machine, still be should be functioning, right?
Yeah, it should.
For all intents and purposes, should get some heat in the middle, right? Or fire in the middle, some kind of exchange, but you do. They just don't tell you, right? In fact, there is there's a lot of great reads out there. I will come to my memory here in a second, but there are individuals that have attested that when you go inside the pyramid, you do feel a completely different shift of energy, right? When you go in, when you're inside the Makut, you're not feeling the same energy on the inside that you feel on the outside, right? And remember, it's been, and we'll talk about this. Let's continue. So, nonetheless, the Great Pyramid, has so many different mathematical secrets inside of it. One of which being pi, right? One of which being the true alignment to true north, right? I'm talking about the nth of the degree, right? Within the fraction of being aligned to true north, right? Those mathematical secrets, by far, right? I mean, there's volumes and volumes of books on the pyramids, right? I have several books, right, that I've researched and studied, and even still, right, it's just too much to fathom. But we do know some base understandings about it that gives us some more elaborate kind of maybe metaphysical understandings about how it works. So, number one, the pyramid is the process of what's called squaring the circle, right? And squaring the circle is a way that we kind of say we make two worlds meet, right? The physical and the spiritual, right? The internal and the external, that which is above, that which is below, right? Because the square, right, obviously is something that is considered to be oriented towards matter, right? Square, as we all know, it's material, matter. the base four, right? And then the circle, right, is spirit, right? And my students learn a lot about this in the symbolism behind astrology. Um, as far as what the symbols, the glyphs of astrology mean. But the circle always represents spirit. And we know this because the circle is just nothing but a dot extended from itself, right? It's just enlarged. Or you can contract the circle to a dot or expand the dot to a circle. It's the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So, nonetheless, right, understanding this, right, the mathematics implied in squaring the circle is the same thing as the base formula of astrology. Astrology is formulated from the same mathematics, right? The circle is the one that we're dealing with, 360 degrees. But from there, the duality, the duplicitousness of life is there, right? And that process, of course, and even when you have what's called a zygote or the fertilization process, that split happens automatically. And from there, life ensues. But, inside the circle, squaring the circle, you have to start with dividing the circle. And the pyramid has some very unknown factors about it most people don't know. The pyramid's face is not flat. Most people think it's flat. It's not. It's actually concave. And there's a split in the middle.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So each split, now we're talking about the duality principle within the pyramids, because now you have the circle which is being squared. So the one now has the two sides, and it's not two sides, but two within one side, right? So now we're talking about the duality principle that is inherent in the pyramid, designed to show you the perfection of mathematics, right? Now, of course, the pyramid itself, the shape of it, harnesses the number 3 as well, because there's 3 obvious, right? It's a triangle, right, with 4 sides. So a triangle, 3, and then 4, right, which is the 4 elements. So the 3 is the 3 modalities of existence of matter: gas, air, and water, or mind, body, and spirit, or yin, yang, and then neutral, right? 3s, right? And mathematics and nature reveals these things on multiple levels. The 4 elements obviously would be just that, it's 4 elements, right? For fire, earth, air, and water, right? And then the quintessential, right, is that the 5th, which is the undergirding side, right, has mastery control of the other 4, right? So, and to understand that, right, the way they shaped it and the way they placed it is very specific, because we're going to talk about why it aligns with certain star positions, right? So in essence, right, that pyramid has all numbers almost contained within it, from 1 to 5, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All the way up, and then 5 doubled on itself is 10, and actually it's a dodecahedron, or actually, well, not a dodecahedron, but it looks like a diamond, because there's things underneath it as well, right, that you don't see, right, the way this is structured. So again, right, mathematics and also geometry, which is, right, using shape to control energy, right, is a part of how the pyramid is structured. In fact, pyramids are known to have regenerative properties. In fact, if you put a razor blade inside of it, the razor blade will resharpen itself, and rust will be removed. In fact, you can place fruit in there, and the fruit will not rot as fast as it would on the outside of the pyramid. So this shape has some very specific spiritual and metaphysical qualities. Go ahead.
Well, our nose is a pyramid.
Exactly. It's just what you see on the outside is the same shape it has on the inside. Mm-hmm. Right. So, I mean, math, geometry, sacred geometry is how our ancestors constructed everything, right? We didn't use the geometry that we use today, in the sense that a square is just a square, right? No, a square has very spiritual, metaphysical properties to it, right? So, all of these things are inculcated into the structure of the pyramid. But getting deeper, right? This pyramid was aligned to resemble the night sky as it would look like as of 10,000 BC, 10,500 BC. Right? It doesn't look like it did in the sky as it would as of that day. It's actually as it would have looked in 10,500 BC, which is called Zep-Tepi, or the first time. Right? And people say, what is Zep-Tepi? What is that? It's the great beginning, right? It's really when we became a civilization unto ourselves. We had Kemet long before. Kemet was Kemet long before the dynastic rule.
Oh yeah.
Right? That was the late period. That's why the language popped up. They can't figure out how a language just pops up. It never popped up. It was being developed over time, and we always had it. We just stylized it and brought it into existence once certain periods took place. But we're going to talk about that here in just a second. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's a that's a silly thing. I mean, that's how they present it to you in history. It's like, boom, first dynasty, or we seen some. How do you go from just little clay pots to pyramids? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, no aliens. It was aliens. It was green men. Right. Well, they ain't built one yet. They came back and built one. Tell you something there, right? But anyway, and even if it was, you probably noticed somebody was on the scene like we not helping. You gotta feel this on your own if it is real. But no, we built those pyramids, and without a doubt, because there's many records that attest to the fact that we did. But nonetheless, getting deeper into it, right? So that Zep-Tepi, that first time, right, is very specific in the night sky because it was aligned to a time when Leo was in a very prominent position in the night sky. In fact, Leo was in a position in opposition to where the Sphinx or the Hieromarket, right, sits now, right? Where the Hieromarket sits opposite to it, rising 10,500 BC, would have been the constellation Leo. Mm-hmm. And the night sky matches what's on the ground in the temple complex at the Great Pyramid. Tells you something that time was a very specific, important time, right?
Yeah.
Our king's list goes back far longer than what they promote and teach you, right? For the most part in the Western world, our king's list goes back thousands of years, and they say so does the Sumerians. I'm not to say that they're right or wrong, but I'm going to tell you something about the Sumerian timeline and the king's list. Those are astronomical figures. If you don't believe me, go check it out for yourself, right? There's no king that literally ruled for 4,320 years, but there is 4,320 years. That's a mathematical or astronomical number, right? So, nonetheless, right, neither here nor there. Our king's list is pretty extensive, right? And so, and not to say our king's list could have some of those secrets embedded in it as well, but I haven't noticed the repetition of numbers in the pattern of astronomical data, not in our king's list. So, nonetheless, right, that first time that Zep-Tepi, right, is when our civilization, we could say, had a very prominent beginning, or when we realized that this is the area and the land and the place where we were going to literally become a nation, right? And so that first time, that Leo energy, which the Hieromarket or the Sphinx, right, represents, right, that mastery of man's mind over his animal nature. Yeah. And so cultivation, right, of crops begins at this time in mass, right? This is what begins the study of science, right? We're not coming, man starts practical and becomes spiritual. He doesn't start spiritual and become practical. What doesn't go that way. But when we become practical enough to spend time to contemplate the placements of the stars, mathematical equations, the fundamental nature of shapes and sounds and sizes and colors and plants and all the things that go along with creating a thriving and flourishing civilization, has to be done when you have time. And agriculture is the only means that can be done. When you're hunting and gathering, not going to happen. Too
No,
busy, right?
that's why. That's why our our buddies over here always stealing
Right.
because they still hunting and gathering.
Right. So, you know, the civilization, for you to create, in order to create a civilization, you have to have agriculture, right? And they talk about Asar being linked to the Zep Tepi, right? So, getting deeper in, right? Fast forwarding, right? About 8,000 years, right? To when the times when the pyramids were being constructed, we aligned them to very specific stars. Now, here's the thing, folks. In our language, remember, we just mentioned that Eshu Ilegwa, Rasebek Anpu Apuat, whichever you choose to call him, right? The trickster, what have you, right? The language denotes the understanding of the thing that you're studying, right? So we don't call stars in Kemet, right? The proper name for them was Sabah. And Sabah, right? Because we speak in ways that we kind of relate things on multiple levels, right? A Sabah is not just a quote unquote star. Some of the ways that we could interpret Sabah would be instructor. In fact, one of the words for instructor was also Sabah. So a teacher is also a Sabah, but a star is a Sabah. And so a star being a Sabah, star meaning in the sense of instructions or information, right? So a star to Kemet, to the Cometians, to our ancestors, was the means for instructions or communication. Big difference in saying a star, huh?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? So we're getting light code transmissions, right? We're getting energy downloads, information downloads, right? From these vectors, right? And these vectors have existed for billions of years. And so since they've existed for billions of years, and man has barely yet to figure out cellular technology. So let alone starlight technology takes them a while, right? So starlight technology, which is what the pyramids are structured around, right? Because remember, it's a large crystal, right? And crystals refract what? Light. They harness what? Light. They cultivate what? Light, right? So every temple in Kemet, and I repeat for the third time, every temple in Kemet was aligned to a Sabah or a star. Every temple, not just the great pyramids of the Merkut, the Great Pyramid, but every temple.
Yeah.
So, and I'm sorry, folks, I'm not here to beat up on. I'm just here to clear the air and make sure everything has a fair and even playing field. That's all we really want, right? It's strange, right? How, and in fact, I'm going to read the folks something, the people something, and I rarely do read, right, on the show, but I thought it would be pertinent for us to kind of listen to a quote today. This is out of a book called The Orion Mystery, right? Unlocking the Secrets of the Pyramids, right? And on page 182, right, we'll read, right? It's the third paragraph down. It says, it has been common sport to pit the ancient Egyptian against the philosophical genius of the Greeks. Egyptian sages are said to have been but poor relatives to Solon, Pythagoras, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. As for the sciences of mathematics and astronomy, experts such as Parker and Nussbauer, and trust me, folks, I'm interjecting, they're very racist, right? Parker and Nussbauer, right, felt that the mathematics was rudimentary calculations children of 10 could tackle, and The astronomy, simply quaint observation of the stars to interpret superstitious beliefs and the doings of the gods. Whatever skills the Egyptians might have possessed, say these experts, their astronomy was less developed than that of the Babylonian and of the Greeks. Yet such views are at odds with what the ancient Greeks said of the Egyptian sages they made contact with in the early part of the first millennium before the Common Era. Here's what they say. Most ancient Greek and Roman authors believed emphatically that Pythagoras, Plato, and even Homer received their philosophy from the ancient Egyptians. Sidebar, read Stolen Legacy by George G.M. James. Yeah, maybe he didn't read that, but we did. Right? And it by far concludes that, yes, the Greeks were subservient to the Cometians by way of knowledge. Right?
Yeah.
So to continue, Diodorus, 1st century BC, tells us the most educated of Greeks have an ambition to visit Egypt to study the laws and principles of a most remarkable nature. Although this country was closed to strangers, and I repeat, it says it was closed to strangers, those among the ancients known to have visited Egypt, Orpheus, Homer, Pythagoras, and Solon. The great Strabo, 640 BC to 25 AD, had this to say: the Egyptian priests are supreme in the science of the sky. Mysterious and reluctant to communicate. I'll repeat, what did he say? Mysterious and reluctant to communicate. They eventually led themselves to be persuaded, after much soliciting, to impart some of their precepts, although they concealed the greater part. They revealed to the Greeks the secrets of the full year, whom the latter ignored with as many other things. So that shows, right, by far, right, that the people that were supposed to be the erudite ones of the day were learning their knowledge from those that were closed-lipped, and they did not disclose information freely, especially to those that were uninitiated.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, you see this. You see it. I mean, we have a recent example of this with the Dogons.
Exactly.
Where, I mean, you know, he pried for years. For years.
Exactly.
And they finally gave him a little something.
Exactly. So again, right, considering, right, all of these things, right, when it comes to the fact that our ancestors were by far the progenitors of this knowledge, right?
Yeah.
By far. Because I couldn't find any temples in Babylon or Sumer that were aligned with any Sabah or stars. Not one. Right?
Yeah.
Not one. You would think one. They had observatories, don't get me wrong. Not systems where this whole temple was there to observe Alpha Draconis, right? And when Alpha Draconis, literally, I'm talking about these temples were there for hundreds of years observing the same star. So that's how long we studied and took note of these things on a basis from the simple fact of you walking in and out of a temple was an exchange of knowledge. Remember the fact that the name of a Sabah is Sabah, meaning that you walking in and out of the transmission of knowledge even by the fact of entering the temple alone.
Yeah.
Right, so again, showing that the level of knowledge that our ancestors had was by far superior to anyone at that time. And I would bet you my bottom dollar that we were the ones that gave many of the insights to the Sumerians on how to refine or establish the science. In other words, we didn't just give the mathematics out freely. We didn't have scrolls where you just came in and read them and said, okay, I know what these people are talking about. So for the Nugbauer to make an assumption that because he couldn't find information that would correlate what he thought would be advanced astronomy as far as mathematics is concerned, or advanced mathematics as far as astronomy is concerned, that by way that the Egyptians, they're rudimentary. You don't become rudimentary by building pyramids that no one else, even in their day, could duplicate, and even today can't duplicate. So I'm just saying, like, think about the racist remarks and the process of how even the Merkut is viewed upon, and the knowledge that comes with it, and the people that give it. Because if you really listen to what I'm about to tell you, it's going to show you that we, without a doubt, were the ones that had mastery over this knowledge, and the ancients attest to that. The ancients never say the Babylonians were the ones that taught the Cometians. I haven't found that yet. Nukebauer, I think, probably has some conjecture, but I haven't found it. Right, but nonetheless, continuing, going deeper into this thing here, this Merkut. So, right, it's a large crystal, and crystals, right, they harness light. So we know that a Sabah, right, which is what the Merkut are aligned to, or the Merkut is aligned to, right? Sabah is it's a set of instructions or information, but a Sabah is also a door. Sabah is also a path.
Yeah.
Right? Sabah is also a conduit. Sabah is also a channel, a portal. Well, folks, quick note. You ever watch the movies when a person dies? What do they first thing that they say they see when they die?
Light.
Uh-oh. And when you reach a conscious state of consciousness, when you reach it voluntarily, when you reach that state of consciousness, right, and you can say that, right, I've seen the other side, or I've, right, tasted, right, of death, or I've gone through initiation, right, I've gone through the great door. The great door is death. The great initiation is death, right? Initiation is just to prepare for that moment for y'all. That's all it is, right? Because when your heart is judged on the scale, yeah, that's what you're preparing for, right? That's what you're preparing for. So that's what the science was all about, right? Is literally becoming a divine being, right? And when you left on vectors of what? Light. You come on vectors of light. When you're born, those vectors of light are called astrology.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we talked about it a few shows ago. You know, I got to experience that, you know, when my daughter was born. It was just like, boom, you know what I mean? It hit the room. You felt it. When she took her first breath, you felt it.
Yeah. That's the cool. That's that light, right? That's that light that we bring. See, the cool is a resilient reflection of the Ba. That's all it is. And the Ba is a spark. Right? Mm-hmm. You can make the spark bigger, right, by becoming a divine being, right? But nonetheless, right, back to our Merkut, right? So the pyramids, right, are aligned to star systems, right, as all of our temples were. In fact, just to go and research for yourself, the temple of Aset in Philae, right, in Kemet, was aligned to the star Sirius, right, and that was in 700 BC. During one of our, when we weren't really in power. But the proper name for Sirius is Sopedet, right? And this is a star, right, that for all intents and purposes, in fact, it's the brightest star in the night sky, first of all, folks. It's the brightest, right? But Sirius, right, is respected from different cultures all around the world. Not just Kemet, but Kemet, of course, having a great respect and profound admiration for the star Sopedet or Sirius. They aligned it to one of the shafts in the Great Pyramid. In fact, the Great Pyramid is aligned to 4 specific stars, right? The King's Chamber, which is ironically called the Sun Chamber, right? Not the King's Chamber. Think about that for a minute. It's the Sun Chamber, right? I found that out. I'm like, wait a minute. Here we go. Right. It's the sun chamber. And so the sun chamber is aligned to, right, Al-Natak, which is one of the 3 stars in Orion's belt, right? Or really, it's aligned to Orion's belt, right? But if we really pay close attention, it would be what is called Al-Natak, which is the kind of middle to left star of Orion's belt, right? And so the other side, I believe the southern side, if I'm correct, is aligned to the Canis Minor, and then the Queen's chamber, which is truly called the Moon chamber, or the chamber of the Moon, right, is aligned to Sirius, right, and Alpha Draconis, or Draco, right? Well, the constellation Draco, but the star Thuban, right? And Thuban was the pole star in the time of the Commission's effect. Thuban was the pole star from 4500 to right around 2000 before Common Era, right? So we align those shafts to stars, right? Now, here's some funny things about the stars that they're aligned to. The Orion's belt constellation, right? Orion is also known as Sa in Kemet, right? And Sa, right, or Sahu, but Sa proper, not Sahu, but Sa, right, was akin to or connect to, right, the Neter Osar. And in fact, the term for Orion in Arabic is Al-Jabir, or Al-Jabir, and Jabir means that which has been split up or cut into pieces, right? So that constellation is tied to, right, Asar, and especially considering, right, the fact that you right, are talking about that principle that was told in the story as being cut up into 14 pieces.
Yep.
Right. So showing that, and remember, the Arabs and the Arabic language is a derivative of something much older, because the people in Arab or Arabia are right next door to Kemet. So all of those, that area over there, right, had a lot of intermixing of ideas, concepts, and words, right?
Yeah.
So now we know Al-Jabir, and that's where they even conjecture that algebra, right, comes in, because algebra, right, is taking something very massive and breaking it into finite parts, right? So, right, getting deeper, right, the constellation, right, has some very astronomical or astrological imports. It's tied to what is called Mrigashira in the nakshatra system out of Jyotish or Vedic astrology. And Mrigashira, just like it's called Orion the Hunter, right? Well, Asar, right, is the one that actually went out and civilized, or went out and searched and began to help man finally come to the great time, Zeptepi, of self-realization and peace, harmony, agriculture, and so forth, right?
Yeah.
In fact, they say that that's where kings go when they die, right? To become a star, right? So we know that Orion, right, Orion's belt, right, and Asar tied in to that particular shaft in the sun chamber, right? And so remember, light is instruction. So remember, when you pass, you see light, right? When you become initiated and you reach a certain level of consciousness, you see light internally. you begin to what? Have a what? Aura. Light comes around you, right? So light, in fact, astrology in India is called the science of light. So these light vectors entering into a crystallized matrix by way of a sarcophagus sitting there, and that sarcophagus is made of granite which resonates, and there's a whole system by way when that light enters in, right, and refracts in certain ways and doesn't. Remember, it's pitch black in there. It's pitch black. So when that light hits, you think it's pitch black when it's working. And let me sidebar this: the pyramid has been the things that make it work they've been taken out. Right? In when you become an initiate, you are taught to render magical tools useless once they have no purpose. Right? Well, this is a magical tool that was used by the priest class and the initiates to gain higher levels of consciousness and to travel and gain instruction on vectors of light. That's what it was. Right? And when you come out, and guess what? You didn't go in from the outside. You went in from a tunnel which has a labyrinth underneath. You didn't come in from the outside. There was no way of entering from the outside. They had to bust in to get in.
Yeah.
Right? So it was an initiate process for you to even get into the pyramid itself. Right? On the bottom of the pyramid is a statue of Asar. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is all there. This is all there. So you're becoming there to become a god. You're there to raise consciousness. You're there to shift your mind's eye to your inner realm, to die, to come out as a god. That's one of the purposes of it. I'm sure it also heals. Remember, it's a crystal, and this is a pyramid, right? We don't build things like this just because they look nice and they no. And we didn't need it for agricultural purposes because Kemet is the land of plenty.
Yeah, that's the whole reason why they were,
Right. So the agricultural purposes would serve no purpose.
Mm-hmm.
None. So now we know food is not a problem, right? What is it? Well, we were showing you, right? In essence, what it is, right? And there's multiple things that it is. It's not just one thing, but you can count on this because there's no reason why you would have a sarcophagus in the sun chamber with those specific vectors of light hitting. And not only that, the moon chamber is also called the regeneration chamber. Also, I want you to know that, right? Remember, the sun chamber was probably for the process of literally raising consciousness, and the moon chamber was probably there for sustaining consciousness or to regenerate or to become healthy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So those now the other vector for the king's or the sun chamber is the Canis Minor, right? The small bear, small dog. And I haven't done too much studies on that star yet. I've got to do some more research just to kind of find out what the vectors are coming from that. But I'll tell you this much: I would bet your bottom dollar has something to do with opening and closing that portal as far as the way. Right, as far as that specific star and the energies that come through it, I would bet your bottom dollar that was probably like the key access point. Because remember, in the pyramid, there's false doors.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. So again, right, and when you understand Anpu, Apawat, opening and closing the way. In fact, there's a whole conjecture about one of the robots that they use, which is called Apawat, to further investigate inside the pyramids. And they didn't quite say, I bet you, what they found, but nonetheless, as a whole another. Right, conversation, but keeping in tune, right? So the lower, right, pyramid, the moon chamber, right, was connected to Sepet, right, and so it was connected to the star Sirius. Now, look, There's a lot of knowledge out there about Sirius, y'all. Lots of knowledge. I mean, the Dogon still to this day, right, can still track. I mean, they still track it, you know, and considering, right, right. And you know, I'm sorry. Before I forget this, let me make sure this is correct. So, Alpha Draconis is connected to the King's Chamber or the Sun Chamber. I'm sorry. I want to make sure I get this right. So the Alpha Draconis, which is the pole star at the time when we were in power, that vector was important as far as that spiritual energy coming down from being what they call they're called the imperishable ones, right? The pole stars. And so at that time, that energy of being stabilized, being focused, being connected to the source, right, being moved, just like Osar, comes through that vector of Alpha Draconis. In fact, the Draconis constellation is massive. It's a huge snake, right? And so that energy coming from that pole star through that constellation literally gives them, I don't want to say dragon-like energy, but I mean it is the energy that will sustain you for, you know, for an eternity, to make you conscious of being conscious, right, in the inner planes. In fact, most spiritual work when you become a master is done in the inner planes, right?
Yeah.
So now, alone knowing that Sepedet or Sirius is tied to the Queen's Chamber, and so is Canis Minor, right? That lower, I don't say lower chamber or less chamber, but the Queen's Chamber is used for regenerative purposes. And here's the thing: Sirius is connected to Aset, right, or Isis, right, and she is the mother of all the living, right. Now, remember we said that Sabahs are instructions, right, or stars are instructors, right. Now, if you ever get a chance, folks, and there's a lot of books you'll get from me to read. There's a book called The Dawn of Astronomy, a study of temple worship and mythology of ancient Egyptians by J. Norman Lockyer. Get that book, right? In that book, he explains without a doubt and goes through all of the temples that were aligned to stars, right? But in the book, I believe on page, I want to say 228, in that book, he shows, right, what's called the annual. It's kind of like the measurement of the rise and fall of the Nile, right?
Yeah.
And so Sepedet or Sirius is so important in that it would time the inundation of the flood of the Nile, or the inundation of the Nile, and so again showing that when the star, right, would make its helical rising, right, in the dog days in summer, right after, on page 228, he shows how the increase of the flood, the Nile would increase, right, and overflow until all the way into, and it would do that gradually until January, taper off all the way back and down, and went until there's almost a drought right before, and then boom, again here comes the floods, right? So this is how it's looked upon, as it's an instructor to tell us now is the time to plant.
Yeah.
Sabah are instructions, right? Not only in the sense of just light codes and information, but in the sense of the ability to understand cycles and the ability to understand how to use it in regards to agriculture, right? So we can see our ancestors knew and emphatically had an idea that these sabahs are instructions, right? And portals or doors to different realities, right?
Yeah.
Because if that Nile didn't rise, you best believe is a different reality for the next year. Right? Right? So, considering, right, just understanding the imports and implications of this is deep, right? Because now we're knowing that this whole machine is a God machine. It's a divine maker. It's there to make you stronger, more powerful. It's there to regenerate you, amongst other things, right? And yet it could still be a power plant. The kind of power plant that doesn't use the technology that it has now. because we did have electricity, folks, back then too. Don't believe the hype. In fact, there's a book called The African Origins of Electromagnetism. You should read it.
Yeah.
As an engineer, I know you probably have that book, right?
I think I lent it to somebody a long time ago.
Yeah, it's been all around for years, but still a great book to read, right? But Sirius, shows the power of inundation of life, the floods, renewal, growth, fecundity, right? So that energy, that vector, and of course it's a binary star system, and then the whole star conjecture of what it is, and maybe there's life there. There's a whole thing about Sirius, right? But we know that it is the brightest star in the night sky, and right, that the light that comes from it was channeled into that chamber, right? And if your subtle body, right, your chi body, right, is able to absorb that and then transmit it into the physical body, yeah, that's pretty dope. Right? Oh yeah, pretty dope. But nonetheless, showing that this is a spirit maker. It is there designed to elevate your consciousness and to take those that are initiates, right, to the next level. And that is worth building something like that, because those initiates then were the people that literally, and this is in the early dynasties, the early dynasties, second, third, fourth dynasty, when we were in full power. So these were the height. This is the baddest dudes in Kemet. I mean, these were the guys that literally were the spiritual stormtroopers. These were the priests of the Temple of Ra. Right?
Yeah.
And if you understand the Temple of Ra, you don't even get into the Temple of Ra until you're a spiritual stormtrooper, because you got to handle heavy-duty energies.
Oh, yeah.
See, the Temple of Osiris, for those that are doing the long path. The Temple of Ra is the short path.
Mess around, hurt somebody.
Right.
Hurt yourself.
But those that are, and it makes perfect sense, because those in the Temple of the short path, wouldn't you want a shorter path? Right? When you want a path that's going to bypass, and man, throw me in there. I'm ready. I'm ready for the, let's say like in the Jedi, I'm ready for the trials. Right? Ready to Star Wars. I'm ready for the trials. Ready for trials? All right, well, you got to sleep in there for 3 days. No light, no food, no bathroom, just you and you. Right? And you and you, and the rest of the yous. Right? And you're going to deal with those yous one way or another. You're going to come out mad. You're going to come out more disturbed. Right? But if you came out right, you're a god. And see, the gods, they didn't play with men. So they weren't walking around the people and hanging out. In fact, remember, the priests were tight-lipped already, right?
Yeah.
So imagine what's cracking off in them pyramids. You know they're going to tell you? No. But a metaphysical mind, a spiritual mind, and mind that understands the mentality behind our ancestors and what African spirituality is, then you know what it is. Right? You can see. Doesn't take much. And you start studying the inner structure of it, you'll see those light vectors, right, produced radiations that changed your consciousness. Now, back to the astrology piece, because right, it gets real deep when we start talking about light and light codes and light information and shifting consciousness and traveling and doing all kinds of stuff. Because remember, right, in the spirit, right, you can do there's all kinds of realities that are valid that are not valid here. So who's to say we don't travel? Who's to say that we can't communicate to beings that maybe are extraterrestrial? But it's not uncommon or unfathomable to us, because we know that everything in nature has a consciousness anyway. Even the rock that they use, right? I mean, you know what's so special about granite? Granite, right, is radioactive. Right? It's radioactive. So the granite in the pyramid is radioactive. Right? And then you place that with limestone, right? Which is an insulator, and limestone, right, is made in water, right? And water, right? Limestone, and where is granite made out of? Fire. So you have water and fire, the vibrations of those things inherent in the rock, and that water and fire creates an oscillation, which creates a pattern of vibration in the thing. That's why when you're inside of it and it ain't even on, you feel it. It says it's a pyra what? Mid. I mean, you see what I mean? If you really meditate on it and go deep in understanding what it was designed for, you know what it's for. Right?
Yeah.
Right. But the uninitiated, oh, it's a granary. They had grains underneath, and because the pyramid saves grains, and
Man,
right.
That's a expensive silo, fancy silo.
It's a tombstone. It's a tombstone. Yeah, they buried the dead there. Not one body's been found. Not one. And we found the body of the man who built it. He wasn't nowhere near it.
Yeah, man.
You see what I'm saying?
It's interesting.
Just little things to think about. But nonetheless, we'll leave it at that, right? I think we've had a decent show so far today, right?
Indeed.
We can go much deeper, folks, and not even scratch the surface, right? We hadn't even talked about the Ben stone, right? We haven't talked about the inscriptions on the Ben stone, right? Check it out, right? You might be surprised to find something astrological or astronomical in there, right? So again, right, our ancestors, right, and here's the thing: when you did see it, you knew something about it was special because it radiated, right? Imagine walking up to something pure white. I'm talking about pure white in the comparison of the surrounding area with a diet with a gold tip.
Come on, you think marble floors look good?
What?
I mean,
and to be next to it when it's on? Oh no. You'd be like, yeah, that thing's vibrating something. And that's why the priest class were viewed upon like gods, because of the knowledge that we contain in order to create something of that nature.
Yeah.
Right, so we had, sorry, Nuke Bauer, we had mathematical equations quite exquisite. It just was the priest class was smart enough not to let Nuke Bauers and Ptolemies and things get inside to figure out how to turn it on. Because if we put Trump in there, he'd disintegrate, right? Right? Turn it on. I'm ready. It's just nothing. It's a great machine. It's a great thing. See how that works. Hey, can you put that inside? Can you see how you can get that inside? I can get inside. Hey, let me get inside. And then next thing you know, poof, orange hair is gone, right? Right. So you can't give the people the keys to the machine, right? They'll hurt themselves. Right.
Indeed.
So nonetheless, right, I think we had, like I said, we had an excellent show. I've enjoyed really digging into it, and like I said, we may even have a part 2. I think we will, maybe in the end of the season, or maybe even next season. We'll really go deeper and kind of study some more implications of the actual chamber, not only the chambers, but the halls and the 7 levels that they have, 6, which including a hidden 7th. Again, showing some other things that are going on inside there, metaphysically speaking. But we will definitely, again, like I said, we'll touch on this and go deeper in another episode.
Absolutely. So, once again, I want to remind you all that this episode was brought to you by Push It Forward Media Group and Caliprucia Astrology and our good patrons on the Patreon. Oh, and speaking of our patrons, we got a question.
Oh yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, let's just knock that out real quick. So, first question is, what's the significance of having the sun and the moon in the ascendant?
Well, it's kind of a question that is kind of similar to a reading, if you will.
Yeah.
And I don't typically do those just because it's not fair, right, to the individual that you're looking at. It's not fair to the science. It's not fair to yourself because you get shortchanged by trying to kind of coalesce generalities. But let's just say for the sun and moon, right? We won't say what the implications of it is. Implication of being in the ascendant is, and the reason is because the sun and moon are planets that rule one particular house and one particular sign, and because of the importance of that in a chart, we have to know the ascendant and other placements that really would give us keynotes of what that really means, because it's not all the same for everybody. But for the sun and moon to be conjunct is what we consider what is called a new moon, right?
Yeah.
And a new moon in astrology is a time where obviously we're about to have a new moon on the 21st when it is conjunct Rahu, which is what we call an eclipse. So you're talking about something that produces eclipses, right? So the moon and sun typically being in the same house, same sign, within a good amount of degrees together, shows someone that is very determined and self-confident. In fact, to the point they don't like anyone to give any type of external input or interjection to their endeavors, right? They're very self-sufficient. The mind being the moon, sun being soul, being in the same house. It does limit the breadth, right, of an individual many times for the expansion kind of range of actions in consciousness. So they become localized and very much monopolar in regards to their actions, right? So they become focused, can be very focused, very, very, very concentrated in certain things. But again, that can be very positive if you're doing something that is tangible and has closed-knit circuits, closed systems, right? It's not an open system, but when you're talking about life, this can be challenging. Being born during a new moon, the moon is dark, right? So a dark moon, in essence, right, can also be what is called a malefic in astrology. And malefics can tend to do things to cause us situations where we have to learn certain lessons to wake up from the slumber that we're in. So hopefully that gives some interjection on the sun and moon conjunction, but in the ascendant would be a kind of a per case scenario, if you know what I mean.
Indeed. All right. Well, hopefully that settles that real quick, and again, y'all keep coming with the questions, and we'll answer them the best way we can. And again, if you're looking to get consultations, definitely reach out to Brother Ra on his various methods of communication.
Indeed. Take a class. That's what we do, right? We unpack these things. I can tell you that the students that are in my class are having a good time, right? Enjoying learning the science, the fundamentals of Jyotish. So if this is something you want to learn, you want to know, you want to explore, folks, come to the class, right? There's going to be another class starting very, very soon. It will be on Sundays. The current one is on Saturdays. So if you're interested, let me know. We definitely can discuss costs when you reach out to me. And again, like I said, if you don't take my word for it, ask people that taking the course. What do they think? Are they getting their money's worth? I've been told that I'm underselling my information and services, but I'm here to just help people become avid learners and avid practitioners. That's my joy, right? So, by all means, take advantage and come learn.
Indeed. So with that being said, thank you all for tuning in. We'll be back here next week with another great show. Want everybody to make sure you stay safe out there. Just be mindful of the climate, so keep your eyes open and everything like that. And reach out to us, follow us on at Cosmic Convos on Instagram, and hit up that Patreon. DM us, email us, and we'll do our best to take care of you. All right. So, with that being said, we're out. Peace.